Hello, this is Gonzalo Lira speaking to you live, and this is the Roundtable. And today I've got three guests. Right now, two are here, and the third one will be arriving shortly. He had a little snafu, but he's on his way. And I have here Angelo Giuliano, who is a longtime resident of China. He's got a great YouTube channel. Link is in the description below. And he talks about everything. He's like me, one of these fools who's got an opinion. And so Angelo and I, we've been we know a lot of people in common, and we've been swapping DMs. And it's the first time that we've interacted. And Angelo, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for coming.
It's a great pleasure. I've been following you too. It's amazing the work you're doing. Telling the truth from there directly, on the spot.
I'll pay you the $20 after the show.
All right.
And Jackson, no, thank you very much for your kind words. And Jackson Hinkle, Jackson is just another guy with an exceptional grasp on the situation, just like Angelo. And I've been on his show. Angelo, why don't you introduce your show and tell us our audience where they can find you?
I'm sorry.
I meant Jackson. Please, my mistake.
Oh, okay.
My mistake. Jackson.
Yeah, my show's called The Dive. I'm on YouTube and Rumble. And thank you for having me on. I've been watching all of the roundtable panels and stuff, and obviously been following you for a while, and they've been super informative. So I'm stoked to be on this one.
Oh, thank you very much for being on it. We're going to be joined by Wyatt Reed in just a little bit. He had a little personal snafu, but he's on his way, and no worries. He'll pop in roughly 15, 20 minutes into the show. That'll be fine. And the reason I wanted to gather you three gentlemen is because what I want to do is give like an overview of the state of play in the West and how this emerging World War III is happening. I mean, Jackson, I'll throw it out to you. Because I feel that we're in World War III, and that it's Eurasia and the global South against the civilized nations, the Western democracies. I mean, that's how I'm seeing it. What about you? How do you see the situation?
I see it the same way, and I think that you put it best in the video you did called Sitzkrieg, where it's like the war before the war, essentially. Yeah. And this is all a broader setup for China, right? And turning everyone against China. I don't think it's going well, but I think the U.S. and the collective West are very surprised at how many of their historic partners that they thought they would be able to corral against Eurasia, against China, against Russia, against all these states, have decided to jump ship and move towards the commodities producing countries because it is advantageous economically, politically, and they have the military might as it currently is in the regions that they're fighting or going to be fighting in. So yeah, I would have to say that we are definitely in the war before World War III, and it's only going to go down from here.
Which country do you think was the biggest surprise for the collective West? My thinking is Egypt. Egypt. That's the one I think that really blew their socks off. They were like, wait, Egypt was supposed to be our buddy, and they are turning to the Russians hard. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. You tell me, Jackson.
I think that Saudi Arabia is only going to continue to move further away from the West after they do this whole price cap thing on Russian oil. We'll see. But I think that that's been a huge surprise for the Biden administration right now.
Yeah. Angelo, what do you think?
I would say India. The reason is that Egypt and actually Saudi Arabia had already very large deals with China related to the Belt and Road Initiative. Actually, China, I don't know if you remember, but already 2 years ago, they had talks with Saudi Arabia about dealing, buying oil with other currency than the US dollar. I would say for me, I'm very surprised by India. Although they have some cooperation. India is actually part of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation. So yeah, but it's the world is changing. It's just amazing. But keep in mind, this was not done overnight. They've been preparing this for a long time. Especially when you look at actually China and Russia, what they've been doing with the US bonds. Oh, yeah. I mean, slowly it's been 10 years. If you look at the curve of China, slowly, even though China has a very large trade surplus. I mean, this year they should have like $800 billion US dollar. And normally they're supposed to recycle this into the Ponzi scheme, into US bonds. And China actually has been decreasing the US bonds holding. And then if you look at the last 8 years, what Russia has done is completely sold those positions. So those are advanced indicators. We could see it coming. And other countries, even allies, look at the US bonds position. It tells you a lot about they are actually losing confidence. And, and they're starting to take positions on financial positions. Just look at the financial. So they're hedging their bets slowly.
Yeah, the thing that freaks me out is that the Federal Reserve is the largest holder of U.S. Treasury bonds in the world. That's not a goddamn good sign. When you're monetizing your debt that way, I mean, Jackson, is there any other way to look at it that they're monetizing their debt?
No, and you're right in that it's not a good sign. I just listened to a brief podcast on my way back home to come on the show here. Yeah. And it was a LaRouche podcast, and it was them discussing an old question that Lyndon LaRouche had asked, whether or not Western leaders have the moral or, intellectual fitness to govern and not take us down a cascading path of economic decline and decline in our status on the geopolitical level. And I think if anything, if you look at the decisions that our leaders have made, in government and geopolitics and the Fed, all of these things combined, it's clear that for many years we've been headed down this path. But now the generation of leaders we have in office are a generation that were brought up on the lies of the previous generations that said to believe all this stuff, that America is the best and we'll never lose our global partners no matter what we do. And they're having to reckon with the ramifications of these poor decisions and these poor choices. And now they're stuck and they don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, look, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I was running a financial blog that I was writing my thoughts, a blog that I started during the financial crisis, sort of like to figure out what the hell I was thinking. And it sort of like took off, and it had a big audience at the time, right? But when QE started, I thought, man, this is the beginning of hyperinflation. And, if you looked at it logically, it was going to be hyperinflation, but they managed to kick the can down the road for 12 years. And here we are. And now it looks like the can has gotten so big that it can't be kicked anymore. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. Angelo, how do you see it? I mean, how do you see this ending, by the way?
Whether the US and the collective West is panicking, you can do unlimited printing of cash as long as you have the hegemony. The dollar is the global currency, so you can afford to do that. Once it's not the global currency, you enter into a hyperinflation. And this is what we are. Those are advanced indicators. Right now, this is nothing compared to what will happen in the very near future. I mean, de-dollarization, that is going to be the huge collapse. And what I was hoping is that they would come to their sense, and actually we would find a way just to bail out, because this is what the US needs, is a bailout. And they need to sit down with the bonds holders. I mean, really, like Japan, Germany, China. And so I think it's so suicidal. I don't know if you studied the World War II. They're trying to replicate basically what was done in World War II. You see, Lend-Lease Agreement it was inspired by World War II. World War II, what the US did was actually didn't fought. I mean, really, if you really think, who fought? Actually, who actually pushed Hitler at the beginning? The transfer of technology, money came from Wall Street. It's an inconvenient truth. If you can check, Sutton, he was a banker. He says clearly, money was coming from Wall Street at the beginning, and they were actually more anti-communist than anti-Hitler at the beginning. Then they ended up like financing both sides. So, it's like divide and conquer, and they were hoping to come up at the end, and then to have a USSR to be also destroyed, and they didn't manage. And the way I see it now is that this is a continuation. They need to finish the work. They were hoping after World War II that they would be the only one. Because everything was destroyed.
I see your point, but I'm not so sure that we can walk it back all the way to World War II. I mean, the decisions that have been made over the past 25 years, those have been bad enough. I mean, because a lot of people say that it all started with the creation of the Federal Reserve Board back in, 1919, right? But, it worked fairly well for a good 80 to 100 years, depending on how you measure it, right? And so the idea that, any day now the Fed is going to collapse, I always thought that kind of mentality was kind of silly. But now it does look like the whole, castle of cards is going to collapse. I mean, because they really are pushing their luck. And I want to know why. Why are they so antagonistic towards Russia, antagonistic toward China, just looking to pick a fight when they're so weak? You see what I'm saying?
Well, Gonzalo.
Yeah.
Who's fighting the wars? Are the other US fighting the war?
No.
No, they're having World War II. Who fought the war? Europeans fought the war. Yeah. Asians fought the war. 100,000 US Army personnel lost life, but it was a very small minority. Here you have they are going to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian, and then maybe to the last European. They are going to fight China to the last Taiwanese, to the last Japanese, to the last Korean. That is the risk. If they are going to use the platform, because they need, if they don't have the support of Korea, South Korea, and Japan, they cannot contain China. It's impossible. They need to launch attacks, and probably it's going to be Japan, because they're looking at changing their constitution to be more aggressive. So you see, they will fight to the last Japanese, to the last Korean, and to the last Taiwanese. Ultimately,
and the last Australian, I think. Too.
And they will do the Lend-Lease agreement. You want weapons? But imagine the huge boost. And this is a reset. Somehow it's going to be, they're hoping for a reset, to a remake of World War II. I'm just simplifying. There's a lot of simplification here.
Oh, of course.
But but you see, they're not fighting the wars. Are they fighting the wars? No, they're far away. They will bring support, but ultimately it's going to destroy all Asia, actually. A lot of people, they say containment of China. It's not containment of China. It's all Asia that is going to suffer, because the countries in the whole region, they have a trade between 30 to 50% with China. Mm-hmm. It's massive. It's in an integration, de facto integration, and the Belt and Road Initiative is actually accelerated this integration.
Yeah. Well, the whole issue of the Belt and Road Initiative that people don't seem to notice or realize is that the Chinese came up with it as a way to safeguard against the Americans putting up a naval blockade and cutting off their trade. That was the whole point of Belt and Road. That's what the thinking of it. But Jackson, where do you think it's going to get really bad? Do you think it's going to be Asia is the really bad place, or Europe, or is it going to be equal? I mean, what's your vision as to what's to come? Oh, well, Angelo's drinking.
That's not beer. I need to make sure. I mean, some people, they ask me, this is water, guys. That's water. Sorry.
I'm teasing.
One thing I'll add to the previous conversation is, what does this stem back to? I think it stems back to, in a lot of cases, when you look at when you look at DC, when you look at the Beltway, the underpinning ideology, it's Mackinder's and Brzezinski's ideology of securing the Eurasian heartland. Being able to have secure control within the hands of the West on the region, the minerals, the raw materials, and the population of the Eurasian heartland. Because if, their idea is, if you can control this region, Eurasia, Central Asia, China, if you can control this region and the resources and the population there, you essentially control the world. So when you have a, developing challenge to the West that is controlling all of this, Russia, China, and all of their collective partners in that region, then you're going to go to whatever extent possible you can to try and destabilize the entire region. And I think that there are, as the West continues to see more and more nations jump ship, like what we were discussing earlier, either with BRICS or BRICS Plus, or if you look at kind of the unraveling of the Quad and the U.S. having to, move to starting this AUKUS, partnership because India isn't going along entirely with the Quad anymore. You have to understand that the West is going to have to look at Europe and also understand that, hey, it's possible that these EU member states start jumping ship and moving closer to Russia. And I think that we are seeing a controlled demolition of the European economy to try and ensure that we bring them back under our grasp. So I think that's where we're headed. It's anything possible to get regions that might be moving closer towards the Eastern sphere of influence under our grasp again.
Yeah, the Europeans in particular, I don't understand them. The way that they have cratered their own economies following the Americans off the cliff insofar as the sanctions thing is concerned. I'm stunned. I'm flabbergasted. That's the only word I can think of. It's old-fashioned, but I'm flabbergasted. But that they, deliberately torpedoed their own economy. And I'll tell you something that this is going to sound stupid, tinfoil hat brigade, conspiracy theory. But I'm convinced that a lot of the Green Party people are being paid off by somebody to have gone the route, especially in Germany, have gone the route of no nuclear and all green energy, no matter what, and just played into the hands of the Russians because it was just incredibly stupid. I don't get it. I mean, these people are supposed to be smart, right? And now what's going on in Netherlands? I wanted to pivot a little bit towards the protests that are going on in Europe. That, correct me if I'm wrong, nobody in the Western straight press is saying a word about it, are they? Jackson, you've got your finger on the pulse of that. What are they talking about? This is huge.
Yeah, I mean, you have not only Dutch farmers that are standing up, but farmers all across Europe now that are standing up in solidarity with them. And I don't know if you guys caught it, but Zero Hedge just did an article on how Canada has a plan to basically mimic the Dutch plan of fertilizer nitrogen reduction. So they're going to follow in suit. Same thing's going to happen there.
Yeah. And what happened in Sri Lanka is 1 year of those green farming practices torpedoed their economy. The Sri Lankans don't have enough food. They're broke. They're screwed. And it was just a single year of these policies. And they want to do it in Canada. Angelo, what do you think of all this?
Well, it's part of the globalist agenda. It's interesting. You just mentioned Sri Lanka. Remember, countries like Sri Lanka and like many other countries in the global south, they've been taking loans from the World Bank, the IMF, and those are conditional loans, meaning you lose your sovereignty because they come in with the NGOs, regime change NGOs, they hijack your democracy, and then they come with conditions which they call liberalization. A nice word, but what does it mean? It means selling state assets, containing you completely, enslave you. The interest rates that Sri Lanka was and all Africa is paying is double what China is charging. And they call China, debt trap, which is never. It's not a debt trap. They actually
whenever they accuse anything, if they ever accuse the Chinese of something or the Russians of something, it's what they themselves are doing. That's the thing that I've noticed. The projection is off the charts. Angelo, I interrupted. Please continue.
No. Well, exactly. I mean, just to give you an example. Well, there's so much propaganda especially anti-Belt and Road Initiative. There's a bill signed by the U.S. which was on, financing all those medias, also USAGM, which is the propaganda arm of the U.S. Mm-hmm. And they're spending $300 million a year to demolish China on the Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah.
Just imagine how it is. How positive is that? China is actually bringing infrastructure. It's tangible. It's really tangible. It's not like loaning, enslaving those countries. They're building infrastructure. And the money that the US is spending is actually demonizing the one that is building infrastructures. And then I'm not even talking about, regime change, selling them weapons, extremely high rates. Short term, it's always those loans are very short term. China, they tend to have much longer term loans, and I'm not even talking about the loans that China has forgiven to Africa. I mean, we're talking about recently, 4 or 5 years ago, $10 billion US. They say it's okay, you don't need to repay it. I mean, they're generous, but again, they're not Mother Teresa. They have their own self-interest, but it's a very different approach. They are going to bring infrastructure, but then they need raw material from that country, but they're helping those countries to get industrialized. Keep in mind that the colonial project was to keep those countries poor, not self-sufficient, and they didn't want them to be industrialized. They say, you want them to be on the low added value, segment, low added value. Give me your raw material, I'm going to squeeze you. And you know what is interesting with what is happening right now with the sanctions? Well, you see, the price of food, raw material are going higher. Oil, gas. Maybe we are going to pay a fairer price, and our added value is going to be not as high as before. And why do we have a high added value? Because we created entry barriers. You know the concept of entry barriers. It can be IP, but you have plenty of ways to create entry barriers. So this is, we are going to enter into a more fair world. It's interesting. And we mentioned just before allies. We need to ask the question how many real allies the US has. Is Japan, when you have 50,000 US Army troops in Japan, you have maybe 40,000 in Korea. You have the CIA that has financed the LDP, the main party in Japan, since the 50s. It's a New York Times articles in 1992 that actually exposes that. When you have army troops in Italy, in Germany, what Germany, Italy, and Japan have in common? They were the losers in World War II. Since World War II, those have become vassal states. So you see, you have the real allies, UK, Australia. I mean, they blindly follow the US. Then you have the vassal state. They have no choice. They've been hijacked since World War II. And then you have other countries which actually, they were waiting for what is happening now, and they're slowly shifting. India, Saudi Arabia. It's just amazing. And because of that, you have more than actually they're following. Africa is actually shifting completely.
Now, Jackson, let me ask you. See, you're absolutely right, Angelo. You're in the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do people in the States view the shifting dynamics around the world? I mean, most people don't really care; they just follow the headlines. But there are the thoughtful layer of people who sort of like pay attention to what's going on, and I'm curious as to what they think of everything that's going on, and how so many of America's traditional allies are just jumping ship. And so I'm curious as to their reaction.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a lot of people who truly understand what, even amongst the people that are like, good news followers, whatever. I don't know how many people really understand what's happening quite yet. Definitely no one in the news media really understands it. But as someone who does follow this and who sees it going on, I guess I can speak for myself in that it's sad. Like it's not that I want America to continue down the path. It was on years ago, like before I was born, when it was just like, complete unipolar control of everything. But it should have gone down the path of great Americans like Henry Carey, who was Abraham Lincoln's economic advisor, who said, let's industrialize the world with some of the strongest partners that there are. It should have gone down like that. Let's not focus on just unipolar control as the empire crashes, but that's where we're headed. I really don't think that there's a lot of people who understand this, though. Like the some MAGA Republicans who have been voting against this Ukraine spending, who understand that we should focus on our needs rather than Ukraine's needs. Most of them, I would have to say, are buying all the BS surrounding China. They're buying the BS surrounding Xinjiang and Taiwan and Hong Kong. And I don't think that there's like a deeper understanding of the geopolitical currents that are at play yet for a lot of people in the States.
Yeah, because from my point of view, I see the United States lashing out and causing trouble in Asia, in Europe, instead of focusing internally and fixing the situation at home. My thinking is, and this is just an idea, I'm tossing it out there, that the only industry that's left standing in the United States is entertainment and the military-industrial complex, as they call it.
Yeah.
Because every other sector of the economy has been sent overseas. The United States is a service economy. It's post-industrial in the clever phrase, which I've always found so stupid. But since it doesn't have any manufacturing, and the only industry is the military, then the military is the one, because of all the people whose jobs depend on the military, they have a disproportionate amount of influence on the in Congress and with the president, and so they egg on new wars. If there were other industries in the United States, they would be pressuring for their own slice of the pie, and that slice of the pie would be in the United States. But with weapons, who do you use them against? You use them against a foreign adversary of some sort. And if you don't have a foreign adversary, you manufacture one. You create the conditions out of thin air, because there was no real reason for the United States and Russia to be at odds. But yet here we are. I'm sorry, Jackson, you were going to say something?
The one thing I'll say about that is, if you look at the Pentagon versus the State Department, and the Pentagon is far more, beholden to the arms industry. They have a much closer relationship, I think, than the State Department. Sure. The State Department are kind of just like the wacky neoliberal and now kind of neoconservative ideologues that have banded together. The Pentagon is actually warning against escalations with Russia. The Rand Corporation just came out with a big article or a big study about this. They're the ones who are warning against, in some cases, escalating tensions with China as well. It's the ideologues in the State Department who want to lead us down this path. So I think that's an interesting observation to pick up on. And I think that's why Democrats in the State Department are so worried about the midterms and the upcoming presidential elections, because they understand that they're going to kind of lose their sway a little bit within the Beltway if Republicans take control, because they're closer aligned with the Pentagon, and not a sane foreign policy, but definitely a more rational foreign policy.
Yeah, because, I think that the Pentagon is very fearful of getting involved in a war, because they got a good look at what the Russians are capable of. And I've heard from multiple sources that it scared the shit out of them. They really got scared. And so now they're turning to China and egging on China, because they keep saying, oh, the Chinese, look at all the crap that comes out of China. They're plastic toys that fall apart, after 5 minutes, oh, their army's the same. We can take them, it's no big deal. It's just the Chinese. Angelo, you're in China. What's the attitude there? What are people thinking? Especially, what do they think of the United States at this point?
Well, you have to think that Chinese, they think in terms of centuries. They've been. I don't know if you're familiar with the century of humiliation. To end up the.
I know it, but can you fill in our audience so that they know?
So the century of humiliation is we talk about 8 countries attacking China, taking parts of China, and subverting China. I mean, controlling completely China, and they got it's going towards the end, because you have Macau that was handed back to China, and then in '97 you had Hong Kong, which was taken by the British, that was handed over to China. Now to end this century of humiliation, they really need the complete reunification, and this is going to be with Taiwan. But Chinese, they've been planning this for a long time, and they follow. You see the difference between the West and Asia and Chinese is that Chinese, they learn about the enemy. They learn about themselves and the enemy. Know yourself and know your enemy. Think about just for a second how many Americans they know something about China. Maybe something really simple. Just the culture, a little bit. I've been here 25 years. I spent 10,000 hours to learn about the language, the culture. And after that, you become humble. You realize that you are going to see China with the lenses of a Westerner, and you need to start thinking, well, you know what? The only objective people that can look at China are Chinese. And if it's just to give you an example, I like to use this example. the democracy or definition of democracy and Chinese definition of democracy are different, same as human rights. But Chinese, they think it's a good democracy if it's all perception. It's about perception, it's about delivery. But if they're happy with it, and there's a study at Harvard University that says that 95% of Chinese are happy with it. You see the difference. In the West, it's different. It's the elites that control, they've written the rule of the game. When you write the rule of the game, you can actually control the outcome.
Yeah.
And then it's a way to control people. You divide them and you control.
Yeah. What I see in the West is that the leadership class in the West, democracy is supposed to be a representative government, a government whereby the leaders are representative of the people. That is, they come from the people. But what I've noticed is that the leadership class is completely divorced from the people. Even the people who are supposed to be conservative on the right, they look at the common man, the common working man, the farmer, the factory worker, as if he's like an alien from another planet. They don't have anything in common with him. And so because of it, it seems to me that the Western leadership class is much more like a tyrannical aristocracy than a democratic representative of the people, as a class. I mean, I hate to go down the route of, Marxist class struggle, but it's kind of like that. We have an aristocratic, tyrannical class that is completely divorced from the common people. I mean, in every country in the West, there have been all kinds of polls taken of the people, and they are all against the migration policies that have been implemented. I mean, like a majority, like 75, 80% are opposed to it, and they want it to stop. And yet even the conservative politicians are like, come on in, come in. We need more immigrants. I mean, whatever you might think of the immigration issue, if the majority of the people consistently are against it, then the leadership class should be implementing that desire, but they're not, and that just shows to me that the leadership class is just, Xi Jinping actually gives a shit about the people and Putin actually gives a shit about his people, but Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, they don't care.
I'm glad you mentioned just immigration. If I can jump on this,
sure.
In France, the first one to complain about immigration were not the far right; they were the communists. Georges Marchais in the 80s, he got it completely. He said clearly, well, if you allow immigration, it's going to be bad for workers here. It's not about being racist.
Yeah.
It's going to give more power to the big corporation.
Yeah.
And then you had later on Marine Le Pen, that she actually was a replica, but she came later. And then they said, oh, it's racist. And you see, and then the left, they fell into that trap. And then, I'm not, you see, if you want to solve the immigration, you need to stop actually plundering those, stealing, raping those countries. Then people don't want to immigrate. I come from a family, I'm Italian. I grew up in Switzerland. We had to immigrate to Switzerland. People would rather stay in their country. They're happy in their country. But sure, if you are starving, you have no choice. So you see, people should look at the root of the problems. Mexicans, they'd rather stay in Mexico. But you know what? You're stealing, you're raping those countries. And people at some point need to leave. And then those people, they are going to work as a slave labor in the US. So it's bad for those people and it's bad for workers in the US and it's good for the elites.
Yeah.
So you see, but it's very competitive. And leftists, I'm very sad.
It's good for both elites because the left, they get voters, and the right, they get cheap labor. And so that's why they're like in favor of it. They don't care about the people because they don't represent the people. And they're completely detached, untethered from the people. And the people are just, the deplorables, the ones who have to get their bank accounts shut down, the ones who have to be like herded like cattle and milked and then slaughtered. Jesus Christ, depressing iconography. Let's move on. Jackson?
Yes, yes, please, Jackson, sorry.
Speaking of what you were bringing up a moment ago, like the aristocracy we have in this country, pretty much, it's like revolutions start in the way that we are currently witnessing, with what is going on in Europe, for example, with the energy crisis. Democracy was born out of the masses questioning and arguing aristocratic prestige, and that's how it all started in Greece. And now we're beginning to witness the last bulwarks against this great reset. The farmers begin to ask these questions. You're beginning to witness average working people. I don't think yet, but maybe by October, November, in Germany question why it is that they have to take cold showers every day and why they can't, turn on the heater. So I would like to hear your guys' thoughts on this. I see Wyatt's jumping in.
Can I
on the energy crisis?
Hang on, Angelo. Yeah. Let's welcome Wyatt now that he's here. Wyatt, how's it going? Good that you showed up. Thank you.
Good. I'm so sorry, guys.
Don't worry about it.
I'm really bad with time differences, and now you're seeing the results.
It happens to everybody because he's so popular. He double booked. Okay, and so that's why he was late because he's the man, and we're just the dudes. We're like the average voter, and he's like one of the leadership classes. We've been talking about the leadership classes in the West and how they're completely divorced from the people. And Jackson was just I don't know if you and Wyatt know Jackson or Angelo.
I've never met you guys in person. I think we might have interacted on social media a little bit, but it's good to put some faces to the personalities.
Yeah, because let me give a little parentheses before we go on. See, the point of these roundtables is an articulated point in my head, at least, is to get people who are dissidents, who are heterodox, to interact, to get to know one another, so that that we start forming like a real set of interactions. The important thing is to understand that we're all rowing on the same boat and that we have like very similar views, not in terms of like actual policy prescriptions, but rather we all agree on certain fundamentals. That number one, the actual truth, not what we would like things to be, but what they actually are, is the priority. And number two, we let the chips fall where they may, and we don't try to change things for the sake of any political view. Something could be, to our benefit or to our detriment, but the important thing is to be honest about it. And I think that kind of honesty is so gone in the leadership classes, in their spokespeople, in the mainstream media. And what I think is smart is for all of us to sort of like try to come together in these kinds of interactions. And of course, Wyatt, Jackson, Angelo, I did that common, DM thing on Twitter so that you all can continue interacting and interacting with other people, because I don't jealously guard my contact information. Anybody that I've got on my Rolodex, right? I'm happy to share it because I think it's important that people interact and come together so that we have an emerging dissident viewpoint, not a unipolar viewpoint, but rather just a class of dissidents who are willing to say, no, this is wrong. It's not like this. This is not the truth. I got a shit ton of grief over the factual things that I was stating about the Ukraine war when it started, because as you guys know, I was in Ukraine when it started. In Kiev, I arrived the night before, perfect timing. And I was there on Kreshchatyk Avenue, right down in the middle of Kiev as the invasion was happening. And I was telling people what was going on. And I was like a Putin bot, a Russian shill, it's very disappointing because, Uncle Vladimir has yet to give me that dacha on the coast. He promised me, he still hasn't delivered. But anyway, kidding aside, I was saying certain things at the beginning of the war. Everybody said that I was just full of shit. I was lying, this and that and the other. And as the weeks and months have gone by, everything that I said at the time was shown to be true. And if it had been shown to be true at the very beginning, so much grief would have been avoided, and perhaps this war would already be over, and so many countless lives would not have been needlessly lost. Because that's my concern and my priority, that many times these lies create the conditions where people die. And I want to avoid that at all costs. And I've talked too much, but that's my priority. Wyatt, it's a pleasure having you on. I'm sorry, Jackson, the point that you were making about Europe slipped my mind. Can you reformulate it and pass the ball to Wyatt? Because I'm really interested in his perspective, since Wyatt is in Spain, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that will be, interesting. Briefly, I was just saying that revolutions historically have begun when the masses question prestige, aristocratic prestige, and like what's going on in the world and who gets what resources, whatever. And when you look at food, when you look at inflation, when you look at energy, I think is going to be the big one in Europe. I think these questions are going to be asked by the masses, and it's going to have unsettling answers for them. And this is going to cause a great deal of unrest. So as someone in Europe, what are you seeing right now? How bad do you think it's going to get? And what do you think it's going to end up causing to take place in these governments?
Yeah. Well, so all across Europe, you're seeing double-digit inflation. Spain in particular hit a 37-year high in inflation last month. All of these are it's only going in one direction, right? This is not coming down anytime soon. The price of gas continued to shoot up again today after yet another reduction on Nord Stream. Obviously, the writing is on the wall. Things are going to get bad, and they're going to get pretty bad pretty soon. And really, now the question is, I don't think, because you don't really get a sense talking to people that they really are aware, I think, of how bad things are going to get. People are going out, right? Having normal life, as most people all across the world want to do. But at the same time, you're dealing with the highest gas prices that people have ever seen. That's a worldwide phenomenon. The highest food prices people have in living memory. That's a worldwide phenomenon. And, Europe in particular is poised to take the brunt of this because they're so dependent on the Russian gas that they insist on now unplugging from. And obviously, I'm sure you guys have covered this already, but you see light rationing, hot water rationing. You see the kinds of things that you associate with like World War II or something. They're all commonplace now, and they're all being talked about at this kind of general public discourse level. But I don't get the sense that like individual people are huddling together, like what's going to happen with Nord Stream 2. But I do get the sense that people are aware things are going to get rougher, and they should, at least start saving gobbling together some kind of rainy day fund. That's very much a common refrain for sure. And that's what I'm doing. I think that's what everyone really, smart should be doing. And especially people like you, Jackson, that have to now seek these bizarre alternative ways of getting paid. And you have to kind of get submerged into like the crypto world now, because you've simply been shut out. You like me are blocked from accessing PayPal. And this was, a point that I think I wanted to make too. This is a big lesson I think that we can all draw from what we've seen over the past few months, is that we don't have the kind of infrastructure that a dissident, opposition to the whole system would really need to have in place to be able to get serious about actually getting rid of the parasites and the jackals that make all of our lives way more miserable than they need to be. We are vulnerable, right? We can be deplatformed at a moment's notice. They can just turn on the algorithms and just, it's like a little lever. They just, feel like censoring this guy a little bit more today. You guys, I don't know if you're like me, you'll post a video and half of the time it'll get more likes than it gets views. Obviously there's like something bizarre happening. And we're definitely, in a position where we're vulnerable to it because we don't have our own media infrastructure to replace it with.
I think the real weakness is how you get paid. Because if you clip somebody's ability to earn a living, that's it. Because you can go to a different platform, from YouTube to Rumble, Odyssey, whatever. But if you can't get paid if they shut down your credit cards and PayPal is the only online solution, then you're fucked. Angelo?
Yeah, well, how ironic. I was thinking these days that in order for me to have my freedom of speech, I need to go to Russian station, Russian media, Chinese media. I mean, it's really, think about it. I used to, I used to grow up in the Cold War time. I remember that, what they were telling me about Russia and so on. And I would never think that my country, the West, Europe, would be so extreme. I want to just jump to what you said just before, Gonzalo. I think it was really good about the truth. I think, I'm not into opinions. We all have opinions. What I fight is for the truth. I don't like the labels. I don't like the labels right, left. I don't really care, really. It's the truth. If we can manage to tell the truth, at the end of the day, then people need to be honest, and then you have an opinion. But what bothers me is that people have opinions and they haven't done the work. And this is why I go on those shows and somehow, if we can bridge this knowledge gap, but it's very sad.
What happens is that we're so saturated by the mainstream media that it's inevitable that we there's so much going on and so much information that a lot of times it's very normal that you just look at the headlines of the mainstream media just to get a sense of what's going on, and sort of like focus on what you really know and sort of like more or less ignore the rest, but just catch the headlines. The other day I had a roundtable. I'm not going to mention who this happened to, but we were the four of us were talking, and one of the participants had an opinion about the situation, the military situation in Ukraine, and I'm here in Ukraine, and one of the other guests was a military expert, and we were like, no, it's not happening like that at all. Now, this person that was totally wrong was very knowledgeable about his subject, and when his subject came on, he would be like, oh, the mainstream media is telling bullshit, blah, blah, but he himself was spouting bullshit because it was something that he didn't have the time or the inclination to really get into. And so he had gone with the narrative. And it was a bit of a shock because he heard us and he was like, holy shit, what I thought of my own thing, that the mainstream media is full of shit, they're also full of shit about all the other things. And I think that phenomenon, I think it's the man-Gelman effect or something like that, the Gelman effect. But that seems to be the problem, that we each individually know our own specific topic and we know that the media is full of shit, but we assume that the other information that we're getting, kind of like headline-ish kind of, vibe of whatever's going on, we just assume, oh, that must be more or less accurate, and we don't realize that it's just as inaccurate as the thing that we know. Jackson? Yeah, I see you nodding there.
Yeah, no, I agree because I guess that I initially, when I started my YouTube show, I was focused a lot on, when I started to get in like geopolitics, I started focus on like Syria and China a lot, and wasn't following Russia as closely like 2 years ago. I didn't really think too much of what was going on there. And now, like, opening up this Pandora's box, you really see the truth. But another question I have for you guys, kind of piggybacking off the last point we were discussing, was, do you guys think that there's going to be any effort within Europe to basically course correct? Do you think that there's going to be any leaders? I don't mean like a Hungary or an Austria. Do you think there's going to be any like major leaders within the EU that begin to course correct and listen to their constituents and fight back against these irrational policies that they've put forward in the decisions that they've made with energy in particular, or anything else?
Wyatt?
I kind of like to hear if Angelo, because to me, like, the 5-star movement, this split is like probably one of the more interesting sort of displays of this kind of tendency. I don't know. I imagine Angelo would be able to jump on that a little bit better than I could.
I'm not an expert on Italian politics. I grew up actually in Switzerland, but when it comes to Italy, well, the 5-star movements, they came with a program. It was Italy exit, and actually they backtrack and they change the direction, and this is why they've been losing steam. So there's a mistrust. But I mean, keep in mind, it's been extremely messy in Italy. There's been a lot of meddling over the years. I mean, the CIA was pouring a lot of money in the 60s, 70s. So it's extremely messy. So now it's a big question mark. Now there's potentially Meloni could be the next head of Italian government. But there's a big question mark. I mean, people say that she's independent, but she used to be part of the Aspen Institute. I have some doubts. But again, I think changes could come from other countries. Maybe France. I have some hope from France. But what could be interesting would be, you just need one major country in Europe. And I think the solution for Europe is getting out of EU. I mean, that is the solution. EU is actually an extension of the US. I mean, the EU was Europe was a US initiative after World War II. The father of the EU, Jean Monnet, was actually a CIA agent, and you had actually the first president of the EU was a Nazi recycled, Walter Hallstein. So you see, it was a US project, and it was a way to better control European countries and to make them lose sovereignty. Because right now, a president, whatever president you pick in the EU, he doesn't have the last say because decisions are taken in Brussels. So you see, I think the major problem, when I look at politics in Europe, every single country, I look at what is their position when it comes to EU. And this is what they should be following, is just regain your sovereignty. Once you regain your sovereignty, you might have some kind of democracy. Because again, a lot of people talk about democracy. Democracy is a process of self-determination. You're not a sovereign state, you're not a democracy. So Europe, the concept of democracy is a joke. You have they have created a system in Brussels with lobbies and whoever is in Brussels.
An American
exactly
system.
It's exactly that. They've replicated the model of the US, and you have Europe. But people don't have.
It seems that the only country in Europe that is truly sovereign, that is looking after its own interests, or let me rephrase that, where the leadership class is looking after
Hungary.
Exactly.
Is it Hungary?
Hungary is the only country. Not even Poland or Austria. I mean, Poland and Austria are trying, but Hungary is the only one that's actually where the leadership class is actually doing things for the benefit of their own people, as opposed to lemming-like going off the cliff at the behest of the Americans. There's that great meme of Uncle Sam, playing a Pied Piper and walking into the ocean and getting into a boat. And all the European countries are these little lemmings that follow, and they just sink without a bubble. They just sink with right into the water as they follow the Pied Piper. Wyatt, you're in Spain, right? What are you doing there, and what's the vibe? You mentioned it a little bit that everything is fine, but I'm kind of curious. I appreciate you expanding. What are you doing there, first of all?
Well, I work remotely now, so I am just kind of hanging out in Barcelona, if I'm completely honest. I'm just
It's a nice place. It is a nice place.
Good. Nice work if you can get it. Yeah.
I mean, the vibe, I think is a little bit, is probably similar everywhere, in that you get the sense that things are just going in one direction, and that's going to mean like privatization, right? That's going to mean the rollback of all these kind of nice things that the European countries had for so many years in comparison to the United States, like free healthcare, free education. All these things are suddenly going to be on the chopping block, as basically these countries run out of funds, and they're forced to go back to literal firewood to heat themselves. Like, you're gonna go back to the Stone Ages here, and all of these, kind of relative luxuries that people here can enjoy and take for granted. They're no longer going to be able to do so. So I think, you're at the moment right before the precipice, of the wave. It's about to come crashing into you, and you don't really know where to go. You can't, probably too late to start going that way. it doesn't really matter. It's just kind of coming, and people, I think, are kind of, deer in the headlights at this point. Not really aware of what's quite gonna hit them next.
Wyatt, Jackson, rather.
Yeah, I'm just happy to be living in the neoliberal world order and making my way through it. But given actually another thing I want to hear your guys' thoughts on, given the recent events with Pelosi, this was something we said we want to talk about before the stream started. Pelosi has been planning a little visit to Taiwan for quite some time, and now looks like it's finally going to happen. You have a fleet of American, ships that are leaving Singapore, headed to Taiwan right now. Very, very scary developments happening. Do you think that they're trying to offset something before the midterms and spark some catastrophic event with this action?
Yeah, but
what do you think is going on here?
A little bit of information on what you said. The Chinese privately contacted the White House and told them in no uncertain terms, don't have her go. Don't fuck with us because we're going to respond. And the Chinese don't fucking bluff. I mean, Angelo, do they bluff or are they as good as their word? You tell me.
They don't bluff, but I still doubt they'd go as far as invasion or in the next few months. It might be imminent. I just want to point out there's a window of opportunity for the U.S. to meddle into Taiwan's affair. Tsai Ing-wen, she's a U.S. agent. She's the replica of what you have in Zelensky in Ukraine, Juan Guaido for Venezuela. She used to have, there are WikiLeaks documents that she used to have secret meetings since 2004 already with the AIT, which is the de facto U.S. embassy in Taiwan. So she's being groomed. They put her at that position since that moment. But then this is the second and last mandate. Her mandate is finishing in 2024. The problem is that the DPP, which is the pro-independence party, is losing steam. It was actually not supposed to. She was not actually supposed to win in 2020. She won because of the chaos they had in Hong Kong. Then she won, but then in 2024, there's a high probability that the nationalists, the Kuomintang, might win. And if they do, it might change. We are not going to reunification. At least we are going to maintain a status quo. And I think it's an irony, in 2015, you had Ma Ying-jeou, the president of Taiwan, which was from the Kuomintang. He had met personally with Xi Jinping, and they were actually looking to a gradual reunification and maybe a model like we have in Hong Kong, one country, two system. You maintain your autonomy, you're part of China, but you maintain a very high degree of autonomy to the extent that you even can keep your armed forces. It's a matter of faith for China. It's a matter of pride. If you look at the economy, Taiwan is de facto reunited with the mainland. 50% of the economy, 50% of the export of Taiwan goes to the mainland. You have 2 million Taiwanese that work in China in the mainland. So it's a de facto reunification. Now what they're trying to do is that, they're trying to push to the red lines. And we're getting extremely close. I talked to friends here in China, and they're getting ready. They're getting ready for for war. And it's just madness. And you see, people are hijacked. If you ask Taiwanese, there've been lots of studies, surveys in Taiwan. People are not looking for independence. If they do, they say, I want independence, but I want to maintain the status quo, because they know the alternative is war. So you see, those are planted ideas that the West is doing there. It's pushing, saying, well, I've got you back. How did it do? We all saw what happened in Ukraine. So my hope is that Taiwanese will look at what happened in Ukraine and really start thinking twice.
I don't know if they will, to tell you the truth. Jackson?
I think it's very, very, the developments that have taken place recently are so interesting. Like the U.S. removed a big couple of paragraphs on the One China policy from the State Department website. And then I noticed it this week. the UK equivalent of the State Department, their website that talks about the One China policy, they removed that from their website. Now, Australia's One China policy explainer is still up, but it just seems like this is where we're headed. And like Angelo just pointed out, it is insane for anyone in Taiwan to support a division between the mainland and Taiwan because they're so interconnected. Their trade is completely reliant upon the mainland. But you know, I see where this is headed. If the State Department gets their way, the CIA gets their way, if Mike Pompeo gets his way, and George Soros gets his way, it's going to be a new war against China. That's exactly what they want. But the thing that the last thing I'll say here is it's a delusional fantasy to try and, you know, have the United States reign supreme over China. Their population is 3 to 4 times the size of ours. It's like, in what world do you think our economy is going to reign supreme over China when just by sheer mass alone, it is so much larger? So it's an uphill battle that is, you know, in the long run, impossible to win. Yet you have these delusional, you know, sycophants within the State Department that think somehow we're going to be able to defeat China.
Yeah, it's this desire to return to the good old days of 1945 or the good old days of 1991, you know, where the United States was the undisputed global hegemon, and it's kind of absurd. The thing that I'm kind of shocked. I'm 54 years old, and it's only now that I'm realizing so much of the bullshit coming out of the United States. You know, obviously you can tell by my accent that I spent a lot of time in the United States, and I was educated there. I did university there, and of course I drank from the American zeitgeist, if you will, to mix metaphors. But I had never until now realized how much bullshit I had, you know, accepted, you know, without question. One of the things that struck me of this war here in Ukraine was how careful the Russians were about infrastructure. I'm in Kharkov, which right now is surrounded on 2 sides and coming up on 3 sides by the Russian army. If they wanted to take out the electrical grid here, they could do it in about 5 seconds. They could take out the cell phone and forget about internet. I mean, dude, it's just snap of their fingers, right? But they haven't done that because they're not interested in fucking with the people. And you look at how the United States has conducted a war where they just bomb the shit out of everything. They just deliberately get their planes up in the air and just bomb everything. And then you start to realize, you know, I thought that that was the way you went to war. And then now seeing how you can go to war in a much more humane way, in a much more civilized way, to put it that way, you start to realize, holy shit, you know, I've been believing a lot of bullshit. And you start to question a lot of other things. I mean, Wyatt, has this been happening to you? I mean, what was your experience? I'm actually very curious about this, Wyatt. What was your experience where you discovered, you know, oh, the stuff I've been spoon-fed about American history and culture and how things ought to be is just so much bullshit? When was that red pill moment for you, if you will?
Probably when I went to Nicaragua after high school. I spent about a year in Nicaragua, and I was able to really see firsthand, first of all, the consequences of, there are like, the one thing I will say about Spain, a lot of flies. Nobody told me. Excuse me. So I went to Nicaragua, and I got a sense, first of all, of a culture that was totally different from mine, but a very proud people, and people who would never hesitate to remind me when I would say something like, I'm American. They would say, oh, that's nice, me too. And, you know, and then explain to me, well, no, we're all from this continent called America, you know, kind of things like that, where it's just like, you know, they have basically 100 years of kicking the gringos' asses when they came to dominate them and kicking them out. And they're very proud of that, right? And, you know, to this day, for, you know, as long as this has been going on since really the 1920s, the United States has never been able to keep Nicaragua down, to keep it subjugated under its boot heel. And so, the Nicaraguans have paid a price for that, right? They paid a heavy price in the 80s when they were the recipients of a U.S.-backed dirty war that was funded by cocaine profits that were being dumped into the inner cities of the United States. And they have lost decades of economic development. To this day, they are subject to U.S. sanctions for continuing to buck the status quo and refuse to, grovel before Uncle Sam. And so, that was inspiring to me. I came away with it, I think, a little bit more jaded than I should have been, as I was still kind of like a Western liberal know-it-all. Like, I figured, everybody kind of wants to get to where I am one day. I still didn't really.
Everybody is secretly an American struggling to get out.
Right?
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think at some level I still saw their revolution as a means to getting to my preconceived notion about what, like, collective liberation, or whatever that means. And so I stayed with this mentality, and I was sympathetic to a lot of people who I came to understand were basically big recipients of USAID money. Basically, they were going to be the point of the spear for when this coup d'etat that the U.S. backed and happened in 2018. And inevitably, they all fell in line, and it was just like one by one, all these people that I had met years back. When I just went through the country and kind of palled around with some people who were against the government and thought it was authoritarian or whatever the hell that means. And one by one, it was like, oh, boom, there they go. Oh, boom, there they go. And it's like, and then I'm looking back, in 2018, kind of looking back I remember going to that person's office and they were just plastered in USAID signs. And, you could tell all the signs, all the computers had little stickers on them, property of USAID. It was They have these whole little Acme build a regime change operation boxes that they just dump in these countries. And, lo and behold, you get a coup in 2 to 6 months or something. But I joke, but that's really, how
and they all have the same sign. Have you noticed? It's always a clenched fist.
It's the Otpor symbol.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I read a book by one of the leaders of Otpor. I forget how you pronounce his name, but he wrote a book called Blueprints for Revolution, and basically discusses how all the architects of Otpor that were funded by the National Endowment for Democracy tried to reignite that same sort of style brand revolution in the Arab Spring. And it's just they literally just found one thing that worked kind of well, and now they're just trying to put it everywhere else. But again, we live in a different world now, and I don't think it's working. You can look at Nicaragua right now. You can look at Venezuela. You can look at Iran or Syria or anything like that, and it's not working anymore.
Well,
go ahead, Wyatt.
Just to jump in while we're on this subject, in 2019, when they tried to overthrow Evo Morales, I exposed a woman named Janice Bacadasa, who was trained at the Harvard Kennedy School, and she was photographed at the Oslo Freedom Forum put on by the Human Rights Foundation with Sergei Popovich, arm in arm, best buds. And lo and behold, within a year, she appears in Bolivia, and she's talking about how this, evil, they call him a fake indigenous guy, Evo Morales, he's destroying the Amazon, and he hates the forest, and he hates nature. And so she put on her environmentalist cap, and she created an NGO called Rios de Pie, and they basically used it to mobilize a portion of liberal anti-Morales sentiment there in Bolivia, but mainly they used it to neutralize liberal outrage or pushback in the West against, the overthrow of Bolivia's first indigenous president. Mainly, they were used to basically pretend that the left had rejected, whatever they mean by the left, I guess, that there was this rejection among the left of Evo Morales, and they deployed her to do exactly that. And so you had people like basically saying, well, like, so what? Who cares? He's basically burning down the Amazon because he, doesn't even care about nature or whatever. And so this trick, it's still being used, and it still works sometimes, like this like Otpor bullshit. But I will say, like, Bolivia recovered its democracy in just a year. They're getting worse at pulling off coups, not better, I should say. They're getting better at like making it happen, but then like actually the follow through somehow isn't there.
Well, no, it's that people have gotten wise to it. What they were doing in Kazakhstan, for instance, was a classic color revolution, and the Russians knew exactly how to nip it in the bud, and they did. And they arrested the right people, and they put in not even that many troops. They put in like 6,000, but they were hardcore 6,000, and they put them in the right spot to keep things organized, and they really served to like sort of like stiffen the national police force in Kazakhstan. And that whole thing fizzled out, and that was clearly a sign that the Russians know exactly what the hell is going on with these color revolutions, and they're not going to put up with them anymore. And it's really interesting because a lot of these NGOs that are pro-regime change are coming in with religious undertones now. Like for instance, the I forget the name of it. I think it's called the Jewish Center in Russia was kicked out. And it was because Jackson, you're nodding. I think you know the name. It was the Jewish Center, right? It was.
I think it was.
Yeah. But it was like the big Jewish organization. But the Putin regime was of the opinion that these guys want to overthrow us, and they're doing it under cover of being a religious organization. But their game plan, it has nothing to do with looking after Jewish people in Russia. It's about coming for our hide, and we're not going to put up with it. And I think that a lot of governments are like that, and they're realizing what's going on with these regime change operations. And the Chinese in particular are very clear on it. Angelo, you could fill me in on what the Chinese think of these NGOs. They're really just CIA fronts.
Yeah, absolutely. I have first-hand experience. I was in 2019 in Hong Kong during the riots. Mm-hmm. I have experience. I was in '97 during the handover. I followed the Yellow Umbrella movement in 2014, and then in 2019 the riots in Hong Kong. And you know what they did? They did exactly the same playbook as Maidan. Exactly. They were in Hong Kong during 2019. They were actually showing the movie Winter on Fire. I always confuse. There are two. There's one Oliver Stone, the other one, the propaganda one. Mm-hmm. And they were showing that movie all around the city for indoctrination purpose. So basically the kids, they were like, oh, I want to be that hero on that movie. They worked on the subconscious level. It was extremely deep. They went to the extent, actually Kit Klarenberg, he wrote a very good article on that. They were actually paying students. They were paying students $50. So 1,200 students, they would get $50 to attend the protest. And basically, originally they were not politicized, then they attend the protest, and overnight they become politicized. And the $50, they were supposed to do a survey, but there was actually it was not the purpose. And what they found out is that by having 1,200 students going there, usually they bring 3-4 friends. Jesus. So by spending $60,000, they would have 50,000 kids in the streets. It's the cool thing. So I saw that, and actually I had followed Maidan before, but because I was in Hong Kong in 2019, I had to learn completely what happened in Maidan, because I had to learn, what did they do? All the steps and the escalation. They start with they start with causes that are actually legitimate, but then they get hijacked. And then you start seeing foreigners. They were like CIA agents in the street. They were teaching the kids how to throw a Molotov cocktail. I saw so much stuff. I was going nuts. I was going completely nuts. And they were, and up to the moment where they had enacted the national security law. And actually, I fought for that. I said, you know what, I'm not safe anymore. I speak with my wife, we speak Mandarin in the streets. They were actually aiming at people from the mainland speaking Mandarin, and we didn't dare to speak Mandarin in the streets. It was a fascist movement. It was really scary, and they acted like animals. I mean, extremely scary. So it's funny that those ones, they have the same slogans, freedom, democracy, and it's in English.
In English.
It's all in English. That is the funny thing. It's all in English. The
They're
real
waving
revolution.
American flags too.
Yeah,
and
you mentioned.
Man, what the hell?
There was actually Ukrainian Nazis that were there too.
Actually,
Max Blumenthal
Well, there was
on
an Ukrainian Nazi at the January 6th thing.
I was.
Yeah, who's seen the pictures of that guy? Yeah, there's like a meme floating around. He really was. He was like a Ukrainian guy from Azov Battalion who was mixed up in that thing.
Probably covered the cost, shared the cost of the motel room with Ray Epps.
Yeah, and the other thing too that Angelo is saying is how they use fascists. I mean, like real fascists, right? Look, I've never made it a secret. I am a hardcore right winger. Okay, I'm a real conservative, like pro life, anti-abortion, anti-LGBTQP. I'm hardcore, right? But these fuckers are actual fascists. I mean, they're not fucking around. They are like fascists, blood and soil kind of stuff, and they're the ones that the United States gets into bed with in order to carry out these provocations, like in China, like in Ukraine, like in everywhere. Yeah. Jackson, I'm like ranting. You wanted to
No. You brought up an interesting point, because I think so many of I think the State Department, what they're pursuing right now is color revolution, regime change by way of woke ideology. They're kind of started to change this a little bit. They're saying like, we'll come in and give you these loans if you agree to this feminist policy or this LGBTQ policy, or we are going to denounce your leadership and we're going to try and replace it because you don't adhere to these norms that we have developed in the West of woke ideology. Or in the third case, what they seem to be doing in Latin America, and Wyatt, you could probably comment on this more, is it's a rejection of the historic, socialist movements in Latin America, and kind of a new age of soft coups where they're coming in and saying like, people like the new leadership in Chile, or I would argue the new leadership in what was the most recent election they just had that everyone I got a
Colombia.
lot of. Which one?
Colombia.
Yeah, Colombia. Like what they're kind of riding the coattails of this woke ideology of a younger generation now, and installing these leaders through that. And if you look at all of these leaders in wherever that they're pursuing this ideology, they all have one thing in common. It's that they're all, two things in common. They have this new woke ideology, but also they're anti-China, like extremely anti-China, and they want to turn their countries against China. That seems to be the underpinning of all of them.
Yeah. No, what I met one of these CIA guys here in Ukraine, in Kiev, in December. I did a meet and greet because before I had a channel called Coach Red Pill that was just for young guys, and I was going to Kiev on business, and so I decided, hey, I'll do like a meet and greet, and anybody who shows up is great. And about a dozen people showed up, including this one guy who stood out right away. And, just talking to him, and then later talking about him on my Telegram channel that I no longer have access to because it got taken away by the SBU, but that's another story. What happened was that it became very clear that this guy was, he was for one of the intelligence agencies or attached to the embassy in some sort of intelligence capacity. The evidence for it was pretty much overwhelming. And this guy was a flaming homosexual. pretending that he was straight. I mean, he had like the homosexual list, the whole thing. You know, I mean, he was a gay guy, and I don't have a problem with a gay guy, right? I do have a problem with somebody who's clearly gay, claiming that he's hetero and that he left the United States because it was so difficult for him as a white man. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, this guy was the typical kind of LGBTQP guy that got recruited by CIA and State Department starting in 2012. Somebody who worked at the agency, I mean, for real, you know, at CIA. He told me that like around 2012, the word went out that the recruiters should focus on sexual minorities and ethnic minorities and ignore straight white men, that they didn't want the CIA and the DIA to be straight white males anymore. They want, you know, more equity, more diversity, that kind of thing. And so that's part of the reason that this whole push insofar as LGBTQP stuff is going on. I will always add the P, and you all know why. Yeah, they're pushing it hardcore. And it's weird when you start seeing this shit in countries that, you know, that for them, that whole thing is anathema. And all of a sudden they're pushing it among the young. That's really fucking weird as far as I'm concerned, you know?
Gonzalo, can I jump in?
Angelo,
in?
Sure.
I have my theory in this. I mean, you know, I don't know if I'm right, but I have the impression that it's a deconstruction of society, this whole project. I mean, you know, when you look at what makes Russia strong, really, it's family value, it's patriotism, you know, the love of you, you know, love of your country. I mean, you know, what the West wants to do is to deconstruct. You know, you want to this globalist agenda. It's about deconstructing the human being. You know, the X gender. I mean, where are we going? What is this BS really? And then, you know, immigration. This whole thing about immigration. I know immigration. I've been an immigrant all my life, but you know, I'm against that. You know, because I see what is behind this. It's a destruction of nation state. You need to deconstruct family gradually. All this, everything. You know, from the family. You know, from there. Then you deconstruct. You know, we are the global world. You know, I'm not Italian. I'm not. You know, I'm a citizen of the world.
I'm a European.
And then, exactly. So you see, that project, it's to weaken nation states, and then you can attack them. You know, you put your hands on the
well,
you know, all the.
Well, I mean, look, I have to say. Because of different reasons in my life, I've been fortunate enough to come in contact with a lot of very powerful people, very rich people, some of them politically very, very powerful. And I noticed something that was essential, was that most of them are not particularly clever. They're pretty much lucky. Okay, you know, like when you look at any distribution curve, or let me put it this way: you ever play pachinko, that game where you put like a fistful of little balls and they drop down, and you get a normal distribution curve, right? Well, see, there's always going to be you know, one little ball at the extreme, and it got to the extreme. Yeah, some effort and work, sure, but pretty much by luck. And if it wasn't him, it was going to be some other guy who got to that extreme of being very rich or very powerful or whatever. And so when you realize this and you start talking to a lot of these guys, you realize that they're not very clever. And some of them are really flat out stupid. And so the idea that there's like this big cabal, that they're all like sitting around some smoke-filled room, deciding that they're going to do something, I tend to think that that's kind of ridiculous, because it's like wrangling cats. These people, they can't plan for more than 3 months ahead for the next quarter at best. Okay. They don't have any conception of a long-term plan like the Chinese do. Like the Chinese actually do have a long-term plan, you know? When you start looking historically at China, what they did in the 90s insofar as resolving the border disputes with Russia, when Russia was very weak and China was fairly strong, stronger than Russia was at that time, but they didn't take advantage of it because they were thinking strategically long-term. They were thinking, you know, in 10, 20 years, because of our goodwill today, we'll be able to get some advantages with the Russians in the future. The Chinese do think strategically and long-term, but in the West, they don't. They're conditioned to think short-term. And so the notion that there's like this big plan to do this. I don't think that there's a big plan. I think what happens is that they fall for fashions, and these fashions are destructive. And the current fashion is global warming. It's LGBTQ, trans, and all that stuff. It's just the fashions that they go through. When I was growing up, everybody was talking about snowball Earth, that the Earth was cooling and what we were going to do about it. And then they changed the page and it became global warming. And I'm sure in 20, 30 years, it'll be global cooling again, They just fall for fashion, but they implement these fashions in a very, very destructive way. Sorry for ranting there for a bit. Wyatt, how do you see this whole thing? Do you think that there's a grand cabal, or do you think that they're just stupid people, as I do?
I mean, there's a handful of cabals. We certainly know about them. There are plenty of people who get together in the open, and World Economic Forum, Davos, Bilderberg. They get together, and it's pretty clear what they're doing behind closed doors. They're making deals. They're trying to benefit themselves at the expense of all the rest of us. Generally speaking, it's a system, right? Capitalism is a system that functions because it can, you lose an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos, and another one just plops right into place. I don't think, it's. Are they getting together in smoke-filled rooms? Yeah, probably. But, do they need to do that to carry on sort of the broad outline of where they've already been going for decades and decades and decades? No, I don't think they need to. Whether or not they have these meetings, we know exactly sort of what their general goal is, and it's the complete subjugation of the rest of us, basically turning all the rest of us into a little profit suppliers, little, something
slaves.
that cows
slaves.
Or something. Yeah, slaves. Cows, whatever. Yeah. Cattle.
Milk us and slaughter us.
Right. That's the end game. It's not like a secret. They're pretty clear about what they want to do to us.
Okay, so let me pivot the conversation. I want to pivot the conversation a little bit. Pivot the conversation a little bit to something really specific, which is the Joe Biden presidency, right? We're at the end of July. It's August, September, October, basically about 100 days to the midterm elections, right? And Joe Biden, holy shit, the man is falling apart, and his administration has the lowest approval ratings ever. I mean, even lower than Nixon during Watergate. Okay, this guy is like, lower than whale shit. Okay, so the issue becomes, what do you guys think is going to happen to this man? Huh? I mean, and frankly, look, as I understand it, it's the president, the vice president, the Speaker of the House, then the Secretary of State. I do believe that that's the chain of succession. We've got Joe Biden as president. We've got Kamala Harris. Just her name makes me laugh, as vice president. We've got Nancy Pelosi as a Speaker of the House, and we've got Anthony Blinken as a Secretary of State. Who's going to save us, I ask? Jackson, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, no one's going to save us. It's at this point, it's like a dick measuring contest as to who has the worst globalist government, Germany or the United States. But I think that, what is there to do? You're right. There's nothing that can save us right now. I do think, though, and maybe you guys could chime in on this. I do think that after the midterms, they're for sure going to go after Biden. They're going to for sure try to start some sort of an impeachment proceeding. I don't know how quick it'll happen, though, because there's talks that they're also going to be launching some sort of a, effort. I don't know what it's going to look like, whether it's going to be like a House committee or what, but something to go after Fauci as well, and investigate him. So we'll see how the timing works out and what strategy they pursue. But I could see them waiting a little bit longer for Biden and maybe, letting this ride out through the winter and see how bad it gets and then try to hit him when he's down really bad. But it's a complete mess right now. and they're not going to survive. Now, the last thing I'll say is, if you look at Joe Biden, whenever he's approached with the question of whether he's going to run again, and people say, look, like 75% initially, when he was asked the question on a grassy lawn, and he gave his answer on video, the interviewer said 2/3 of Democrats don't want you to run again. What do you have to say about that? And he got very angry and indignant that, yes, Democrats do want him to run again, and he is going to run again. It's hard enough to convince a president that they're not popular and people don't want them to run again when they're mentally fit and stable, relatively, as you can, being president of the United States. But Joe Biden, with his mental decline and dementia, I don't know if you're going to be able to convince him that he's not going to win if he runs again. I think it might have to be forced. His hand might have to be forced, whether it's going after Hunter or Biden. I just saw a story today that we know as of now, at least, that Joe Biden met with 14 of Hunter Biden's business associates. We have evidence of this, that they were doing huge deals with. So it's going to happen. I don't know how, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's impeachment and then they force him out in that manner. And then Kamala's deeply unpopular, run her in 2024, and then the whole thing implodes for the Democrats.
Yeah, because my thinking at this point, I cannot believe I'm about to say this, but I do believe that this is going to happen. I think that they're going to steal the midterm elections, successfully steal them, and that the Democrats will wind up with a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think that they're going to say, "Well, we did it successfully in 2018, and we did it even more successfully in 2020. Let's just keep on trucking, And they're going to overplay their hand, and it's going to be a complete shit show." I mean, that's what I'm thinking at this time. That the cheating will be so egregious that people will say, "No, this is cheating." And then it's going to be like it'll start tearing the country apart. Wyatt, what do you think? Are you, by the way, Wyatt, are you going to be voting in this election?
No.
Oh, that smirk! It was like you'd stuck your fingers in a socket. Yeah, it was funny.
No, and honestly, I mean, I think the real threat to Biden, I think, comes more from the Democrats than from the Republicans. Because to me, Biden is just the gift that keeps on giving to the Republicans. He's like one, just like failure to another. The gas prices alone, just everything they can pin on Biden is just, I wouldn't, if I was a Republican, I would love to have him be president for as long as possible. He's just so unpopular and so deeply unrelatable, so non-present. He's like a dream if I'm a Republican, I think really, because you see them basically parading this assortment of just total losers. Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris. Now they're talking about Gavin Newsom. Like,
oh yeah,
the desperation is really, it's so pungent now that I think the Democrats are really going to be the ones that are pushing to get somebody else in there.
But who agrees with me that they're going to crook the 2022 elections? You raise your hand there. That's a Freudian slip. Sure.
Subconscious. I think I don't know. I think that I kind of, Wyatt, I kind of agree with you, and I 100% agree with you about the Democrats. And Gonzalo, I don't think so, because if the Democrats understand how deeply unpopular Joe Biden is, and they understand that having the Republicans in power could potentially end in an impeachment of Joe Biden, and they just shuffle him out like that, I could see the Democrats, a lot of Democrats wanting this to happen.
So I see your point. Yeah. Use the Republicans to do their dirty work for them.
Yeah.
But from my point of view, then we get the President Kamala Harris, who is, I question whether she has 90 IQ points. Seriously. And by the way,
I think if you're in the State Department,
clearly stoned.
If you're in the State Department and you're wondering about all this, and you're like, how can we still maintain power but have like at least a more controllable person that doesn't have dementia, it's putting Kamala Harris in charge. I think she's a safer pick for the State Department than Joe Biden. And I will say there is a possibility that the Democrats do manufacture something. I think this whole abortion thing, Roe v. Wade, it's a domestic color revolution, and it's an attempt to try and maintain Democratic power. So we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, when this presidency started, the Biden administration, I thought that they would sort of like get rid of Kamala Harris and put somebody, with a little more gravitas, and I was thinking Pete Buttigieg, or later I thought Gavin Newsom, and that they get rid of Kamala, bring in this replacement, and then get rid of Trump and have the replacement be the president. But now, the dates are coming so fast that I don't think they have the time to do the maneuvering necessary. And I do believe that, I would be extraordinarily surprised if by the spring of 2023, Joe Biden is still president. I mean, can we all agree on that? I mean, that the likelihood of Joe Biden being president by March 21st is very low. Who believes that? Or do you believe that he's going to keep on trucking to 2024?
I just don't know that I know. Like, I have a calendar for like deep state coups and revolutions and stuff. Like,
come on, you got to get the memo. You got to get on the listserv, man. What's the matter with you? Jesus Christ! You call yourself a dissident journalist, and you're not on the listserv with the intelligence stuff.
But Gonzalo, don't you think that this whole thing about divisions, Democratic and the conservative, the Republican,
it's bullshit. It's bullshit.
It's bullshit. I mean, the idea is to divide as much as possible, to give the illusion of a democracy. The only way you can do that is to highlight those divisions. But when you really look about how people are divided, they're divided over things that are actually, it's not matter of life or death. I mean, actually abortion, abortion, those are values, but those are not tangible stuff. I mean, really, I'm thinking, or the gun control. You see, where average Joe, what he thinks about during the whole day, he thinks about how I can put food on the table, how I can afford bills, hospital bills, how I can put my kids to school. I mean, those are the important stuff. They are dividing people over things that are marginal. Yeah. Do you wake up every day, every morning thinking about abortion? Okay, it's important. I do. I get it.
Because I might get pregnant. No, what? No, but are you a bigot? And did you assume that I was a man?
I'm sweating. No, but you see my point. Yeah, as long as you need to manage to give the impression that you are voting for two different people. Yeah. But at the end of the day, is follow the money. Ultimately, how much do they differ in policy, in economy, and so on? It's extremely marginal. They are the same. They obey to the same people. Who funds them?
The same people. The same people.
We got the $76 billion CHIPS Act passed in a week, right? This like economic war on China, basically massive big tech giveaway package that passed 66-33, no problem in the Senate. 50 billion. 54 billion for Ukraine and weapons that passes no problems, but then they give us these little like red meat issues to fight over in the meantime.
Yeah. I mean, the abortion issue. I think that on a moral level, on a personal morality issue, I think it is fairly important. But it is. Like a nation state-wise, and especially insofar as the current economic situation is concerned, it's trivial. There are much bigger fish to fry. And on top of that, the Supreme Court decision was fairly reasonable because the actual original Roe v. Wade decision was a horrible decision, legally speaking. They should have left it to the states to decide. But
Gonzalo, I don't know about you, but semiconductor production in Taiwan is very personal to me, and I would happily, put my body on the front lines to go fight World War III over semiconductors. I don't know about you.
Because you need your iPad to be working properly?
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Or also the Neuralink, because Elon Musk promised that he's going to put a chip in our heads, and those chips, they're from Taiwan, motherfucker. Yeah. No, look. Angelo, you're completely right when you say that all of these divisions are artificial, and that really the Republicans and the Democrats are the exact same thing. The issue becomes, how is it that we reform the system? And to tell you the truth, I think that it's past reforming, and that in a weird way, I think that we all agree that this winter is going to be one of the most catastrophic in Western societies and Western history in quite a while. We're going to see the economic, crash of Europe and the United States. We're already seeing it, and this is summer. When it's cold and people are hungry, I mean, that's when we're really going to see the sparks fly. And so my thinking is that we cannot fix the system. There's not enough time, and I don't think that there is a class of people who could be brought in to replace the incompetent leadership that we have. I think that the notion that Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, DeSantis, that somebody will come in and save the day, wearing a cape and bright red boots or something like that, I don't think that that's going to happen. And I think that we're just going to have to go through a horrible crash. And the only thing that we can hope for is that the crash is let's hope that there's no great war because of the crash. That's my only concern at this point, because I don't think the crash is avoidable. Wyatt, do you agree?
Yeah, I think if you'd have asked me maybe a few years ago, maybe pre-Trump derangement syndrome, I would have given you a different answer. I probably would have been a little bit more optimistic that, there are people out there that are putting the dots together. I still think those people are out there. I just don't think there's really any mechanism right now to connect them, to get everybody really on the same page about, the handful of principles that they, really matter in terms of respecting international sovereignty and in terms of, autonomy, real autonomy. I don't know that there is sufficient sort of forces there in the United States and sufficient push behind them to actually generate anything anywhere near what would be required to actually overthrow the U.S. government or something. And in terms of going through the electoral route, I think we've kind of seen exactly where that can lead us, especially, if you are someone like yourself who still considers themselves to be kind of on the left. I think that the examples of Bernie Sanders on the one hand and the Squad on the other really make that crystal clear. You're either going to be totally shut out of the contest, or if you're allowed to the party, it's going to be, wearing whatever they want you to. And, beyond that, I think it's got to probably get worse before it's going to get better.
Yeah, because, I look at the FBI, for instance. Tucker Carlson did a segment on it last night or the night before. Basically, the FBI is becoming like some sort of like weird, SS stormtrooper kind of thing for the Democratic Party. And it's just fucking crazy. I mean, like really crazy. I mean, it was bad enough when like J. Edgar Hoover was running the show, right? But there was a sense that after J. Edgar Hoover, it was sort of like normalcy and sanity had returned. But now they're really off the wall. And I don't see how such an organization, and I'm just taking that one organization in particular just as an example, I don't see how it can be revamped, reformed, renewed, so that it carries out its original mission. And of course, I think that the institution itself will fight like demons to perpetuate itself and not be reformed, And so that's my fear, because like we can look at the Christian Reformation in pre-Renaissance, that the Catholic Church had gone way corrupt, and Martin Luther and Calvin and the other reformers came up, and we all know the story, right? But I don't think that something similar can happen insofar as the Western regimes are concerned, that there can be some reformation. Or am I being too pessimistic? Or do you guys think that I'm being too black-pilled?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, there's no hope of like a real change for any of those outlets. But the only hope I have, and it was kind of a similar hope I was questioning earlier with you guys about Europe, was like, do you think that it gets so bad that they begin to course correct and say like, well, to save our own asses, not to save anyone else, but to save our own asses, should we begin to course correct a little bit? I don't think so, though. I think if this recent COVID spat is any indication as to how they handled COVID and the unrest surrounding COVID and the lockdowns and all of the mandates, I think it's going to be met with brutal suppression, like violent state-sanctioned suppression, when we begin to have unrest over all of the issues that are making their way into the public sphere right now. I don't think that there's going to be any sort of like check on authority. I think that they're just going to, meet it with violent suppression. What do you guys think?
I agree, unfortunately.
I want to mention something. Yeah, I mean, culturally, we have this difference when it comes, especially Europeans and in the US, the way we look at gun control. Well, in EU, in Europe, I do understand that we don't want gun, and it would not be a good thing to have gun like the same as in the US. But then when it comes to the US, when you talk to people, when people express why do they want gun, is to be protected against the government. How worrying is that? Think about it. They know that the government is something that is an entity which is oppressive, and and they have government have the legitimate use of force, and they don't want that. So you see how pervert is the system, is that you need to have a gun. And so I do understand people that want to have a gun in the US, while I wouldn't want that in my home in Europe.
Well, what's interesting is irony there. Like
go ahead,
this wonderful system that we need to go and export by way of at gunpoint all across the world is like so incredible that we need guns at home to defend ourselves from it.
Exactly. What an irony.
Yeah. You phrase it like that, you're absolutely right. It's a beautiful, sickening irony. Yeah. No, I honest to God don't see how this can be fixed. And like I said, my thinking is that this crash happens with as little damage as possible, and also trying to figure out where to go, where to be, because look at Canadians. Poor Canadian bros. They can't even leave the country now if they haven't gotten the vaccine. If they say anything that Justin Trudeau doesn't like, or Justin Castro, as I call him, you can get your bank account taken away. You can lose your job. I mean, it's just all kinds of nasty. And the final thing that I want to leave the audience with before we sign off is the issue of how the governments are starting to persecute their own citizens, because we've seen that in Canada. We've with the convoys. People lost their bank accounts. Even people who donated to the cause got into financial trouble. Graham Phillips, who's this journalist who's been here in Ukraine for about a decade now, he was put yesterday or the day before yesterday on the sanctions list by Great Britain, basically authorizing the British government to take away all of his assets, even though he is a British citizen. Alina Lip is a German citizen, also in the Donbass region, Donetsk. She's been reporting on the ground. And all of a sudden, she is getting into legal trouble with her government for her reporting. Now, note, Graham Phillips has not broken any law. He's just been reporting. Alina Lip has not broken any law. She's just been reporting. And yet, Alina Lip's bank account was taken from her. Her dad's bank account was taken from her. And now she's under prosecution. She's facing 3 years in prison, but she's not allowed to present evidence in her favor or question the evidence that's being presented. I mean, these are supposed to be the democracies of the West, and they are all turning totalitarian. And yeah, it seems like the Western regimes are turning all totalitarian because they're scared of their own people. Wyatt?
I like apparently this is a crime in Great Britain now. I had to look this up, what they accused Graham Phillips of doing.
Yeah.
They said that his work destabilizes Ukraine. It's his work constitutes, quote, media content that supports and promotes actions and policies which destabilize Ukraine and undermine or threaten the territorial integrity, sovereignty, or independence of Ukraine. So I guess that's the official charge. He tried to undermine Ukraine, and that's no good Brit would do such a thing.
Wyatt, Jackson, Angelo, you better not go to the UK because you're going to get arrested. You're going to get off the plane at Heathrow, and they're going to slap the cuffs on you because you're doing the exact same thing. God damn you!
Literally.
No.
But think about it. We are not even at war with Russia.
Right.
My worry is that
we are at war.
That day,
we are at war.
We are formally, of course.
I mean, not formally. No, of course not.
Yeah. If one day we get formally into war, then I don't know what is going to happen to us. I mean, really, I start to get worried when I see what is happening to those journalists in Germany, in the UK, and we're not formally at war. Now, imagine just for a second if we were at war. I would have to stop going to, Russian media, and I would have to shut down completely. And I think, personally, I don't know you guys, but I think my task, the way I see it, is just to do whatever I can just to inform and to prevent war. But once we are at war, I'm not. I don't want to betray my country either. I will step out, but I'm not taking a gun. I'm not going to take a gun.
You're Swiss,
I'm Swiss and Italian. I have 2 passports.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking. Once in a while, I think about, what if there's a war and what would be my position? I don't know. You see, the thing is that ultimately, Jackson is American. Gonzalo, you what is you saying? You Chilean, right? Chilean in America. So you see, it's one thing to say to expose the injustice. We want to tell the truth. But once there's a war, what do? Are you going to betray your country to be? Just think about what happened in World War II, for who spoke out.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I've been thinking of. Is like it's already this bad with Russia, and we're not technically in a conventional war with them. Mm-hmm. Imagine how bad it if you're reporting the truth about China and they start a war with China, you can't live in the United States anymore. It's as simple as that. And the reason why this is all happening is because there is tacit approval from the United States by way of their extradition of the Australian citizen, probably the most accurate publisher of all time, of our generation at least, who's exposed the most lies in governments all across the world. It's Julian Assange.
Yes.
And once they see what, the United States is giving approval of and going after Julian Assange and what they're going to do, they're killing him. Well, they can go after YouTubers. They can go after journalists. They can do minor things in comparison, such as taking away our PayPal, Venmo, all our social media platforms, things like that. That's nothing compared to what they're doing to Assange. So that's where it all started. No one, batted an eyelash in the mainstream media over this. And now we're seeing the fallout of it. We're seeing them go after every single dissident voice. And it's just incredible to see what's happening. And it's only, going to get worse from here.
Yeah, I think that you're right about the Julian Assange situation, that if they can get away with it with him, then there's no one too big, because he was the biggest if you get right down to it. Am I right? So, us little minnows, we're screwed. If the American government decides to target.
I also don't think that Glenn Greenwald, I don't think he's ever been, I might be wrong, I don't think he's been back in the U.S. since his reporting. No. So that's another one.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good question. I actually don't know whether Greenwald has been back in the States And I wonder if he would get into trouble. Perhaps, I mean, he's a very clever customer, so he probably has a fair idea of what would happen, and he probably keeps it to himself because it's not to his advantage. But if you told me that the U.S. government will arrest Glenn Greenwald, excuse me, if he sets foot on American soil, I wouldn't be surprised, especially because he hasn't done anything except, embarrass people. But apparently embarrassing powerful people is now a crime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, man. These are the Western democracies, the so-called free world, man. Fuck it. Okay. Look, we've been going close to 2 hours, and so I think that we should wind it down. And one of the things I forgot to mention at the beginning of the broadcast before we went on live is one of the things I like to do is to ask each of the participants to bring out some subject or topic that they think is not being discussed enough, which you think people should be paying attention to. And so I don't know who wants to go first, but like perhaps leave us all with something to think about or ponder or look into more, something that you think is really important that people are just not paying attention to. Who would like to go first?
Not it.
I'll go first, and I'll say that people did inform me in chat that yes, Glenn Greenwald has been back to the U.S. So
okay, thanks.
I guess he's safe enough to come back. I'll start off. Something that people are following but should look more into the details on is the energy supply that Europe is scrambling to replace Russian natural gas with, because first it was Qatar, or first it was the US, then it's Qatar. Now they're talking about Nigeria, and Nigeria is a story that everyone should be following. The US has been funding the IPOB, which is a terrorist organization in Nigeria, for years. And this terrorist organization has been going after the oil and gas infrastructure, pipeline infrastructure, and destroying it and stealing the oil and natural gas, LNG, in Nigeria. And Nigeria's top trade partners are China and India, and they are the #1 LNG supplier as well for the European Union. So following Nigerian politics right now and what goes on there, whether or not there will be a terrorist designation of the IPOB, is something that I think people should follow as it relates to the gas supply for Europe.
That's a good topic. I hadn't thought of Nigeria at all, and I'll certainly look into it. Angelo or Wyatt, or are you guys still pondering?
I would say Japan. Keep in mind that for the US to contain China, they need Japan on board. So in 2019, actually Japan they did a reinterpretation of their constitution. It's a Pacific constitution, and they say that actually they could come to help an ally. But now what they're looking at, especially with the new majority, they have a super majority enough to change the constitution and to be much more aggressive. And if the US has Japan on board, they could use actually Japan as a platform to launch attack against China and really contain China. The only way, again, that the US can contain China and be more aggressive towards China if they have at least Japan on board. So look at the eventually, if there's moves for changing the constitution.
Good to know. Wyatt?
So I think maybe the interesting kind of update that I didn't really hear too many other people talking about was the formal end, I believe, of this so-called Disinformation Governance Board that was a Homeland Security Advisory Council subcommittee that ruled that there is, quote, no need for this Disinformation Governance Board. That was a review that was led by Michael Chertoff, obviously one of the co-authors of the Patriot Act, like a hardcore security state technocrat dude, really one of the worst who was put in charge of it. And his explanation was that they didn't need to, let me see if I can pull up the specific phrasing he used here. He described it as basically something that would step on the toes of existing security state projects, basically. And so essentially closing it because there's no need, because it could impact something else we've already got going on behind closed doors. Nobody knows exactly what he was referring to. I can't find the specific quote here, but I did a good piece on this. I spoke with the Gray Zone's Max Blumenthal, because he was targeted obviously by Jankowicz previously. He described it as a blow to the disinformation industry, but he also obviously stressed that that Chertoff basically being putting in charge of this effort and wrapping it up suggests that the Disinformation Governance Board was likely kind of a Biden initiative, but that the traditional security state that's focused on cyber operations, all of that is continuing as planned. That's my update.
I heard that they had shut that down, but if they shut it down, they got other ways to fry that particular fish. So they didn't need it. That's why they let it shut down. And it was terrible optics. So and that woman, what's her name? Jankowicz.
Yeah.
Good God.
The singer, right?
Disney princess and propaganda.
Man. Oh my God. So see, there are some things that automatically disqualify you from political leadership, and karaoke is one of them. As far as I'm concerned, I'm sorry. The thing that I want
Disney karaoke,
and with altered lyrics,
you're gone. Put him in jail. Sorry.
Yes. To the gulag, Disney songs to the gulag. Yeah. What I want to leave you with is actually something kind of horrifying, terrifying, and this is real. And not many people are talking about it, but some very smart statisticians are looking into it. There's one guy in particular that I would recommend you check out. A guy called the Ethical Skeptic. He's on Twitter. It's Ethical Skeptic, one word. Yeah, he's easy to find, and he's doing a lot of statistical analysis of two things that are really, frankly, they're scaring the shit out of me. It's mortality and natality. There are more people dying than of all causes, not like one specific cause, just all causes, cancers, heart failure, everything. And there are a lot more because you see, mortality rates tend to be very steady. Okay, they do tend to peak, like for instance, in the week of Christmas, New Year's. Okay, between accidents and the stress of the holidays, a lot of people die then. But in general, you go back years and years, and it's very, very steady. Of course, it increases because of the size of the population, but it percentage-wise, it's very steady. But all of a sudden, over the last few months, it's been increasing, and noticeably increasing, like double-digit increasing. Okay, it's up there like 12%, and it's accelerating. Okay, at first it was just a little blip. At the beginning of this year, it was like 3%. And this is averaged of all of the countries of the West, of Europe and North America and Oceania. At first it was like 3%, and then it was 5 and change, and then it was 8 and change. And the last figure that's reputable, that's solid, it was over 11%, year-over-year increase in all-cause mortality across all age groups. That's one thing. And on the natality side, on births, I'm looking at the figures right now. Sweden is down 14% year over year for the last month. Germany is down 12% year over year, again, for the last month. Taiwan is down 27% year over year.
Having trouble hearing you, Gonzalo.
Are we left to run the show, or?
I guess so.
Those are scary numbers. Leave us on a cliffhanger like that.
Is it like depopulation? I mean, they did talk at a certain point. They did talk about depopulation, right?
Malthusian ideology, degrowth, depopulation. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm back. Yeah,
there
You're back.
that was interesting timing. Interesting timing, if I do say so myself. Anyway, I don't know if you heard the statistics for the drop in births, in live births.
We heard up to Taiwan.
Okay, yeah, it was just a couple of more. Britain has fallen 9%, and the Netherlands fallen 11%. So these percentages, in some cases like Britain, it's only 9%, but in terms of like standard deviations, it's like 9 times what it should be. Okay, it's absurd. It's like something is going on, and these drops in birth are, again, like the increased mortality. It's accelerating. Okay. I'll go straight to the punchline. I personally think it was the shot. I think that the shot is responsible for this, and I think that this shot, you see, you can't hide deaths. That's the thing that you can't hide, because people talk about the people who've died. People put up social media. The BBC, they scoured Russian social media to estimate the number of dead Russian soldiers, and they keep getting really pissed off at their results, because at the end of the month of May, they only found that they could ascertain 3,500 Russian soldiers dead, and at the end of June, they could only ascertain 5,000 dead. Now, the Western media saying 35,000, 50,000 dead, but the BBC went like with a fine-tooth comb. They were really looking to get every single dead Russian soldier to have an accurate count. And the last count at the end of June, like I said, was 5,000, because you can't hide somebody dying. You can't, okay? Because there's too much paperwork, too much shit happens that it inevitably comes out. And so these figures of births and deaths, that increasing deaths and decreasing births, you can't hide it. And I think that that's going to be the big story over the next 12 to 18 months. And I personally think that it was this nefarious, despicable shot that is the cause of it. Of course, right now it's a conspiracy theory, what I'm saying, but, in 6 months, it's going to be the accepted truth. So stick around. Yeah. So anyway, I want to, that was a downer note. I'm sorry to have left everybody just like blue. Hello? You there?
We are there.
We're here.
Okay, yeah. Because I'm looking at you guys and you're looking not too happy. Maybe I should have tried to do my own karaoke version of Mary Poppins, But anyway, I want to thank you all for having been on the show. I hope you three had a good time and chat. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Yeah. And so this has been the Roundtable. And I will catch you all guys on Saturday. We're going to be having a show about economics. And we're going to be having, so far it's confirmed, Eve Smith from Naked Capitalism and Isabella Kaminska, formerly of the Financial Times Alphaville and now an independent journalist. And we're going to be talking about the economic situation across the globe. So do tune in. And looking forward to it. So take it easy.
Thank you.